What survives when a country disappears? The mystery of Poland. What if you woke up tomorrow and your country no longer existed? Not because it had been destroyed, but because someone had simply erased it from the map. No government, no borders, no official country. You open a map and your homeland isn't there. Sounds impossible. But more than 200 years ago, this happened to Poland. The country disappeared from the political map and stayed that way for 123 years. But here's the strange part. Poland disappeared as a state, but the Polish people refused to let it disappear as an idea. So how does a country vanish and somehow come back? The country with nowhere to hide. Look at Poland on a map. It's in the middle of Europe, surrounded by powerful neighbors with few natural barriers protecting it from invasion. But Poland wasn't always vulnerable. At its height, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was one of Europe's largest and most powerful states. It had enormous territory, armies, and influence. So what happened? Part of the problem was inside. Powerful nobles had enormous political influence, making the government increasingly difficult to control. Meanwhile, three neighbors were growing stronger: Russia, Prussia, Austria. And they saw an opportunity. They didn't need to defeat Poland in one enormous war. They could divide it. How do you erase a country? Imagine three powerful empires looking at a map and asking, how much of Poland do we each take? In 1772, Russia, Prussia, and Austria carried out the first partition of Poland. Territory was taken. Poland became smaller, but it still existed. So they did it again, 1793. Then, in 1795, came the final partition. The remaining territory was divided, and Poland was gone. For 123 years, there was no independent Polish state, but the Polish people were still there. And that's where the story becomes fascinating. When your country exists only in memory. Imagine being born in the 19th century and being told, you're Polish, but there is no Polish government, no independent army, no Polish state. So what does being Polish mean? If the borders disappear, what remains? For generations of Polish families, the answer was identity. They preserved their language, they passed down traditions, they told stories about their homeland. Culture became a way of keeping Poland alive. One famous example was Frédéric Chopin. Although much of his life was spent outside Poland, his music remained deeply connected to Polish identity. And it wasn't just artists. Families and ordinary people carried Polish traditions forward. The country had disappeared from the map, but it hadn't disappeared from people's minds. Could Poland come back? The impossible return. Then came the First World War. The empires that had controlled Poland for generations began to collapse. Borders started moving, and suddenly the impossible became possible. In 1918, Poland re-emerged as an independent country. After 123 years, Poland was back. A government, a flag, a country. But the return wouldn't last peacefully, because just 2 decades later, history would try to erase Poland again. History tries again. In 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland from the west. Just 17 days later, the Soviet Union invaded from the east. Poland was trapped between two enormous powers. The Second World War brought catastrophic destruction. Millions of Polish citizens were killed, cities were devastated, and Jewish communities in occupied Poland were subjected to the Holocaust. When the war ended, Poland existed again, but it wasn't truly free. The country came under Soviet domination and became a communist state. So the struggle had changed. It wasn't about disappearing from the map anymore. It was about who controlled the country that remained. The second fight for Poland. For decades, Poland lived under communist rule. Then in 1980, workers in the Polish city of Gdansk went on strike. Their movement became known as Solidarity. What began as a labor movement grew into something much larger. Millions became involved, and eventually the communist system began to crack. By 1989, Poland was undergoing a dramatic political transformation and moving towards democracy. Once again, Poland had changed its future. But why did Poland survive? The real mystery. Maybe we've been looking at the wrong thing, because borders can move, governments can collapse, maps can be redrawn, but there's something much harder to erase: the belief that a country still exists. For 123 years, Poland wasn't an independent state, but Polish families kept the language alive. They preserved their traditions, they remembered their homeland, and when history finally gave them an opening, Poland returned. Then, after another devastating war and decades of communist rule, Poland fought its way towards democracy again. So perhaps Poland's greatest victory wasn't winning one particular war. It was something much quieter. Poland refused to forget itself. And maybe that's why the country that disappeared from the map never disappeared from history. But here's the question. If Poland could disappear as a country and still survive through the people who remembered it, what actually makes a country a country? Is it the land, the borders, the government, the flag? Or is it the people who refuse to forget? What do you think? This is Curioverum, where we uncover the hidden stories behind the things we think we know. Every story has a hidden why. Stay curious.